Mix in the Dark.
Hey, what's up? It's MaiYang from Mix in the Dark. What do you know? I'm sick again. I remember someone at the creators meetup told me that I was always sick. And yeah, you're right. I am always sick. I now work with grades 2 through 5, and if one of them gets sick, it's done. We're all sick. That's just how it kind of goes at school. But Halloween is coming up. That's my favorite holiday. Not biased at all. This year, I took my kids to Severs Fall Festival. They have a pumpkin patch, corn maze, hay mazes, corn pits, pony rides, and so much more. I'm not sponsored by them, by the way. I just had a really great time there. So if you have younger kids like I do, you should totally check it out. This year, I'm also hosting a Halloween party at my place, and sorry, it's exclusive. I actually used to do this every single year, and I stopped because I had kids. And I usually just invite my really close friends and family members, and it's really chilled. We just have a really great time. Thank goodness for supportive family members who don't like gatherings, though. I'm shipping my kids to my sister's house so that my husband and I can host, and we can finally have some time to just hang out. We usually have a lot of fun doing this. I set up our fire pit for our bonfire. We pull out some tables for beer pong competitions. We pull out the karaoke machine. We set up some tables and board games. This year, we're taking out the robots. So we bought a bunch of fighting robots, and we're going to have some robot competitions. It's going to be fun. We also bring out the adult drinks, of course, and it becomes a choose your own adventure kind of night. So it should be really chilled. Anyway, if you have not checked out my podcast swap with Reminisce, make sure you make your way over there to listen to my friends and I talk about our lives. And who knows, you might know us and you did not realize that you did. If you have figured out who I am, please don't tag me in anything. I'm serious. Remember, I am just a voice that tells your stories. I'm not that cool or anything. I'm just your average Hmong girl who really likes scary stories. Mix in the Dark contents are entirely from the community, and I have a lot of fun managing it. These stories are interesting, and I won't say much, but I will say that any story with kids in there is pretty creepy for me. Please enjoy. Story 1. Apartment 3B. When I first moved into apartment 3B, I thought it was just another small step toward stability. You don't think about hauntings when you're just trying to keep a roof over your kids' heads. You think about rent, work schedules, groceries. You think about how to stretch a paycheck. You think about your kids' smiles and how to make sure they stay that way. I'm a single dad. My twin girls, Ellie and Emma, are 7. They are my whole world. Their mom's been out of the picture for a few years now, and I've done my best to make sure that they live a normal life or at least feel safe. When the lease for our old place ended, I found this apartment in St. Paul. It's an older building, 3rd floor, 2 bedrooms, cheap rent. It was perfect, and it was ours. I signed the papers that same day. The first weeks felt like a new beginning. The girls shared a room with matching twin beds, pink comforters, and a window that looked out over the alley. I slept in a smaller room by the kitchen, and every night I'd hear them whispering and giggling before bed, their voices muffled through the walls. It was peaceful for a while, at least. It started with little things, the kind you brush off. The bathroom light flickering, even after I changed the bulb, a cold spot near the hallway, even when the heat was on. I figured it was an old wiring issue or bad insulation. Then, one morning I found both girls sitting on the couch, their legs pulled up, faces pale. It was a Saturday. Cartoons were playing on a low volume, untouched noodles in front of them. I asked what was wrong, and Ellie just said, "The man was in our room last night." Now, when you're a parent, you're used to the monsters under the bed, shadows that turn into shapes. So I told them that maybe they'd been dreaming. But Emma shook her head so hard her bangs slapped her cheeks. He was real, she said. He was standing by the window. I searched their room, of course. Nothing. I checked the locks, the hallway, even called the landlord to ask if anyone had keys besides me. He laughed, said the only extra set was in his drawer. I told my kids and myself that they were just imagining things and that maybe a car's headlights hit the window wrong. Still, that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. A few nights later, I woke up around 2 a.m. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. You start to know the sounds of a place, the hum of the fridge, the pipes clanging, the occasional creak in the floorboards. But that night, it felt like the air itself had paused. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, from the girls' room to the hallway. I jumped out of bed and opened my door, ready to scold one of them for wandering around. But the hallway was empty. The girls' door was closed. I opened it anyway. Both of them were sound asleep, their chests rising and falling. No signs of anyone else. I stood there for a while listening. The silence had weight. That's when I noticed something strange. Their window was open. Just an inch or two, but enough for the curtain to move. I'd closed it earlier that night, I remembered. I went to check it out. The latch was broken. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, after getting the girls to school, I took a half day off work to figure out this window thing. I redid the window latch. I tried it a few times, and then I called it good. Hopefully, that did the trick. A few days passed, and life went on like normal. Work, school drop-offs, dinners. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the footsteps. Then, one evening while I was doing dishes, Emma came up to me holding one of her drawings. She's the quieter twin, thoughtful and always sketching. "Dad," she said, "this is him." I glanced down. The picture was of a tall, thin figure standing next to a window. No face, just dark scribbles where it should have been. I asked who it was supposed to be. "The man from our room," she said. My stomach twisted. I put the drawing on the fridge, told her it was very creative, and went about my night. But the truth is, I couldn't look at it without my skin crawling. I thought about it long and hard. How could both my girls possibly be seeing the same thing? Then I thought, maybe it was what they were watching. Maybe it was a story that they heard at school. I didn't talk to them much about it, as I was very busy, but it was on my mind. Over the next few weeks, both girls started having nightmares. They'd wake up crying, saying the man was in the corner, that he was whispering their names. I started sleeping on the couch outside of their room. I wanted them to feel safe, and maybe I wanted to convince myself that I could protect them from whatever was happening. One night, I woke up to whispering, soft, overlapping voices. I thought they were talking to each other again. But when I opened my eyes, I realized both of them were sound asleep. The whispering was coming from the hallway. I sat up slowly, heart pounding. It was faint, almost like static, a murmur of words I couldn't make out. I stood, turned on the hallway light, and it stopped. Everything went silent again. The next morning, Ellie asked why I'd been talking to someone in the hallway. I told her that I hadn't been. She frowned. "Yes, you were. You said my name." I told her maybe she dreamt it, but she looked down and whispered, "No, it was definitely you. You told us to come out and play, but it was so dark, and I was so scared." Around that time, small objects started moving around. I'd find keys in places I didn't remember leaving them, cups left on the counter that I swore I had put away. Then one morning, I found all the cabinet doors in the kitchen wide open, like someone was searching for something. Every single one. I called the landlord again, half to complain, half to see if anyone else in the building had weird issues. He hesitated before answering, said the unit had some history, that the last tenant moved out early after strange things kept happening. He didn't elaborate. I asked what kind of strange things. He just said she thought that someone was breaking in, but the police never found signs of it. I hung up. I didn't mention any of this to the girls. About a month in, Ellie started sleepwalking. I'd find her standing in the hallway, eyes opened, but unfocused, whispering things I couldn't hear. Sometimes she'd stop and point toward the wall like something was there. One night I followed her. She walked straight to the window in their room, the same one with the broken latch, and she pressed her hand to the glass. I called her name softly, trying not to startle her. She turned slowly, her eyes wide but still vacant, and said, "He wants to come in." Then she blinked, and it was like she woke up all at once. I took her back to bed, trying to act calm, but inside, I was terrified. I ended up moving both girls into my room for a few nights. I told them it was a campout. We made it fun, popcorn, movies, flashlights, but underneath it all, I was unraveling. The final straw came about 2 months after moving in. I was at work late. I was working a double shift, and my neighbor downstairs called me around 10 p.m. She's an older lady, nice enough, always chatting when we passed in the hallway. She said she heard someone walking about in my apartment, pacing back and forth with heavy footsteps, and she also heard the girls laughing. She asked if we could please be quiet because she was trying to sleep. That made my blood run cold, because I had dropped them off at my sister's for the night. Nobody was home. I raced back, half expecting to find a break-in. The door was still locked from the inside. Everything looked untouched, until I walked into the girls' room. Both their beds were messed up like someone had been sitting on them, and the window, the one I'd tried to fix, was wide open. I don't know why, but I walked over and I looked down. 3 stories below, the alley was empty. That's when I packed suitcases. I told the girls the next morning that we were going to stay with their auntie for a while. We stayed with my sister for a while after that. I told her that we'd had a mold problem. I couldn't explain the truth, not when I barely believed it myself. I only went home when we needed things. We kind of made our home at my sister's. We'd been there for maybe 2 weeks, and finally one night, when the kids were sleeping, she sat down to ask what was really going on. It took me about a minute before I decided that she should finally know. I told her everything. She then told me that Emma had been staring out the window at night in their guest bedroom. The night before, when I worked a double shift, she caught Emma and Ellie awake. Ellie was trying to open the window and Emma was trying to stop her. When my sister came into the room to stop the girls from fighting, Ellie eerily stopped in her tracks and stared at my sister for a good 20 seconds or so before climbing back into bed and closing her eyes. My sister explained that she thought maybe Ellie was sleepwalking because everything seemed quiet after. The next day after school, when the girls came home, my sister asked Ellie about the incident the night before, and she was completely clueless, as if it had never happened. I ran the story in my mind a few times. This was very out of character for Ellie. Also, whatever that entity is seems to have followed the girls. My sister and I discussed possibly moving out. She told me that she didn't mind us living with her for a bit while I figured out the situation. She also told me to move out quietly. Hmong folks believe that if something at your current house is haunting you and you want to move out, you should never say that you are moving out loud. The reason is because if the entity knows that you're moving, it is likely to follow. One random afternoon after school, I told the girls that we were going to go grocery shopping. I did go to the grocery store, but afterward, I dropped them off at my sister's house with the groceries. I went back to the house and slowly moved things out room by room. I never told them that we were going to move. It took me about a week to move everything out. That's when I went to speak to the landlord about moving out. The landlord didn't seem surprised when I said we were moving. He just said that he was keeping my deposit as the contract termination fee. I was a little annoyed. This was easy money for him. The new place we're in now is fine, smaller, quieter. The girls sleep through the night again. Sometimes I think about it and I would convince myself to drive back to the apartment building, but I would stop myself before going in because that would be just weird. I'm just curious. I wanted to know if the room was still haunted and if the new tenants, if there were any, had experienced anything. I've stopped going by. I decided that what I don't know can't hurt us. Never would I want to go through that again. Story 2. Dream Home. When people ask if I believe in haunted houses, I always hesitate. Not because I don't know the answer, I do. I've lived it. I just never know where to begin. My story didn't start with flickering lights or ghostly whispers. It started with the smell of wet paint. It was the summer of 2014. My husband and I just bought our first home, a 2-story colonial-style house on Willow Road, just outside a small town in northern Minnesota. It was built in 1918, old enough to have history but sturdy enough to still look charming. We were in love with it. The original oak floors, the white porch, the big windows that looked out to the yard where I pictured our future kids would play someday. The house felt full of promise. But looking back now, it also felt like it was just waiting. The first few weeks were nothing special. We spent our days painting, unpacking, arguing over furniture placement, normal couple stuff. But from the beginning, there were little things that didn't sit right. It started with noises. Not the usual household creaks. This was different. There were deliberate sounds, slow footsteps above us when we were downstairs, the sound of something or someone pacing from one end of the hallway to the other. We'd freeze, look at each other, and then shrug it off. Old houses settle, right? Then came the smell. At night, around 2 or 3 a.m., I'd wake up to a strong scent of perfume. Not the floral kind, but something heavy and powdery. Sorry if I'm judging, but something like what an older woman would smell like. It always came from the same corner of our bedroom, near the old closet with a warped door that never closed completely. I'd wake up my husband, and he'd smell nothing. Eventually, he joked that I was probably dreaming about rich old ladies, but after the 3rd or 4th time, I stopped telling him when it happened. The thing was, I could now feel her over there, whoever she was. About a month in, something happened that I couldn't laugh off. It was late. My husband was at work. He worked night shifts then, and I was downstairs reading. Around midnight, I decided to go to bed. I turned off the living room light, and as I started up the stairs, I froze. There was a silhouette standing halfway up. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was a solid, dark figure, the outline of a woman in an old-fashioned dress. Her shoulders squared, her head tilted slightly downward. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but when I blinked, she moved. Slowly, she turned, walked up the rest of the stairs, and disappeared into the hallway. I remember my breath catching, that cold rush of air you get when adrenaline hits your chest. My first thought was, someone broke in. I grabbed my phone and dialed my husband, whispering that I thought someone was in the house. He told me to get outside and call 911. By the time the police arrived, I was standing barefoot in the driveway, shaking. They checked every room, every closet, even the attic. Nothing. No signs of forced entry, no footprints on the carpet, nothing missing. One of the officers said gently, "Old houses can make shadows look strange at night." I wanted to believe that, I really did, but I couldn't shake the image, the outline of that woman standing perfectly still, like she was waiting for me to follow her. After the night, the house changed. The air felt heavier somehow. You know how a place can just feel wrong? like it's holding its breath. That's what it felt like. My husband started noticing things too. He'd wake up to tapping sounds on the wall behind our bed, sometimes scratching, faint but rhythmic, like fingernails dragging across plaster. We thought maybe mice were in the walls, so we called the pest control. They tore open a section of the drywall and found nothing. But what got me wasn't the scratching. It was when it started mimicking us. One morning, I was in the kitchen making coffee. My husband called my name from upstairs. "Babe?" I answered. "Yeah?" Silence. I waited and then called again. "What?" He didn't respond. I went upstairs and found him still asleep. I stood there for a long time staring at him, listening to the house breathe around me. That was the first time I said it out loud. I whispered in the empty air, "Who are you?" And I swear to God, the closet door creaked open by itself. Now, I should explain something about the basement. It wasn't finished. Concrete floors, exposed pipes, the kind of place you only went to do laundry or reset a fuse. I hated it down there. The air was always damp and colder than the rest of the house, even in summer. A few weeks after the shadow incident, we had an electrician come by. He needed to check the wiring down there, and while he was working, I noticed he stopped and glanced toward the back wall. "What's that?" he asked. I followed his gaze. It was a patch of wall that looked different, like the concrete had been redone at some point. Smoother, newer. He shrugged and said, "Maybe an old coal chute or something." But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went down with a flashlight and tapped along the wall. I know, who would do this at night? This is how all characters in scary movies die, but I was curious and not trying to let it win, so I did it for my own sake. Anyway, most of it sounded solid except one spot. It gave a faint, hollow echo. Behind the wall, I knew something was definitely there. I didn't tell my husband right away. I told myself it was nothing, that maybe I'd imagined the sound. But after that night, the scratching started coming from the basement too. Louder, more insistent, like something was trying to get out. It all came to my head in October. We'd invited some friends over for dinner. I hadn't told them about the weird things happening. I didn't want to sound crazy. One of our friends, who's into photography, brought his camera and started taking pictures of the house, saying that he'd love the vintage vibe. The next morning, he texted me, "Hey, check this out." He sent a photo he'd taken in the dining room. We were all sitting around the table laughing, but in the reflection of the glass cabinet behind us, there was another person, a woman, standing just behind my chair. Her face was pale, her eyes dark and sunken, her mouth slightly opened like she was whispering. You could barely see this. When I showed my husband, he turned white. He said she looked like the figure he'd seen in the hallway the night before. The same outline, the same dress. This was when I learned that he had been keeping his experiences with the house away from me because he didn't want to spook me. I wish I still had that picture, but I have no idea where it would be now. We've been moved out of the house for a long time now. Sometimes I drive past the house when I visit town. It's been repainted, white with green shutters now. A young family lives there, and I wonder if they've had the same experiences too.
Thank you for listening to Mix in the Dark. I am your host, MaiYang. Mix in the Dark is available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast series. If you have a story that you would like to share, please send it to myxinthedark@gmail.com. If there's a story that you really enjoyed, feel free to hit up my tip jar on Venmo. Just search Mix in the Dark on the business tab.